Okay, I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. Just want to let you know that as far as putting the transmission back together, I use these little number 2 by 56 nuts and bolts and little tiny lock washers that fit on there to put this back together. They were originally put together with rivets, but kind of hard to find a rivet gun that'll get in there because of the clearance, and I've tried larger nuts on there, but they won't fit and sit nice and properly. And with these small number 2s will fit right into that hole that's in there and self-center, which is nice, and that's why I use that size. So as far as putting this back together, one of the things you want to note is that if you look carefully on here, hopefully you'll be able to see this in the video. You can see the old marks where the set screws were for the gears. I mean for the Allen screws, the set screws. You can see where they were, and so you want to put those. Also, on the back side of this, you can see that this side is worn, and this side is not. This is where the spring washer goes. Spring washer goes right like this. So you want to put that. I try to put them back where they were. It's fairly critical that they go back where they were. If you had marked with a scribe as you were taking things apart, if you'd put a mark on the shaft with a scribe, it makes it a little bit easier to get those things back where they belong. There's about 1/8 of an inch. There's about 1/8 of an inch of clearance. 1/8 of an inch of clearance between the collar and the housing. This piece sits in here like this. The bolts without the lock washer go on these holes. Don't ask me why they didn't use lock washers on these ones, but they didn't. I'm not going to tighten everything tight for this demonstration. And this piece is oriented like this. You can see the marks. You see the marks, the old marks of where the lock washers were. The placement of this piece is fairly important. You notice that it's adjustable. You notice that they give you an adjustment on this. That's because there's a rod. That's because there's a rod here that goes for the roll chuck. Roll chuck is right over here. Roll chuck, and that lines up. So obviously that has to be straight all the way across, you know, and perpendicular to the frame. And this is what that's what this guide is right here. So you want to put that back where it was. The main reason that I'm doing this video is actually because of this next part. Like I say, you can see the orientation of these gears, and you can see that this was taken before the unit was taken apart. You can see that these gears are not in perfect alignment with one another. I would imagine that when the engineer designed this piece, he designed it so that this piece right here, got it upside down, piece right here, I'm not going to start over just because I dropped that. He designed it so that this piece right here, okay, was equispaced between this piece right here. That's what I believe. I believe that when he designed it so that this piece was equispaced between there and there. So that's something you might want to try to keep in mind as you're putting this back together. So the spring washer goes on right here. These pieces come together right here. And then this is what's important, and this is one of the reasons that I'm shooting this video. Now you notice right here, that this is pretty close. This is not equispaced yet, but there's a spring washer here, you see, and when I depress that spring washer, I can depress that spring washer so that this piece is dead in the center there. And when I do that, there's a small amount of pressure on there. Okay? Also, you have to make sure that when you put this gear on, you see that there's a flat spot in this shaft right here, and there's a set screw right there. Okay, so you want to make sure that to get that lined up correctly, so that the set screw is on the flat part of the gear. So you want to depress this so that there's a small amount of tension, so that this is equispaced. Okay. And then you can go ahead and tighten up this. Make sure I got that centered there. Okay, so we got that centered there. And you notice now that because of the tension that's on that spring washer, this piece is no longer flopping around. Right? In fact, actually, I can see here I really don't have as much tension on that as I should. So I'm going to loosen this. I'm going to put a little more tension. Put a little more tension on that spring washer. And then find the center of that flat spot. Okay. And now that's centered a lot better than it was. But you can see that this piece is no longer free because the spring washer is actually putting tension on this piece right here. I'm still not real comfortable with how that feels. A little more tension on that. All right. And then the second spring washer goes on here. Here again, take the flat side. Get that centered. And put some tension on that one. You can see I'm putting tension on that spring washer. Tighten that up. And now that has nice tension on it. And you say, well, why is that tension important? tension's important because this motor is bidirectional, and be able to do this. I don't know whether. Okay, I got my battery out here. And you notice that when I move the battery in this direction, or move the battery in this direction, see how it causes it to flip. Okay. Well, of course, when it's in actual operation, so in one direction, and the reason that that's important, that the gear, the reason that it's important that the gear follow like this is because when this shifts from play to rewind, this whole assembly, this whole armature assembly moves back and forth between here and here and here and here. And in this position it's in the play mode, and in this position it's in the rewind mode. So the purpose of those spring washers is to make sure that this piece follows the movement of this gear until it runs into this gear or this gear, and at that point it would operate either the rewind or the play. I've had people say, you know, that this piece isn't moving correctly. It's loose, and if it's loose, then the transmission won't work because it won't shift back and forth as the motor changes direction. That's it.